Where and when were you born?
I was born in Poulton, which is like a really small town in Somerset, and um, on the 27th of September, um, in 2005, 6 a.m.
So you are a Libra.
Yeah.
Do you identify with that need for balance and refinement and beauty?
Some of it, yeah. I think I tend to like balance when it's like a matter of diplomacy, but it depends. Yeah.
Okay. And for people who don't know you, what are three words that would describe you?
Oh God, I don't know. I guess persistent, maybe. Um, Creative when I want to be, and um, I guess fair. I have quite a strong sense of justice, but
That's
yeah, I'm not
that's
really sure.
that's Libra, the strong
Yeah.
sense of justice. What does your shirt say?
Um, it says in Denim we trust. I don't actually know what that means. Someone gave me this this jumper, so yeah, I have no idea what that's about.
I guess it's someone who likes jeans, right?
Perhaps, yeah.
What are the posters on your wall? Did you design any of them?
Yeah, I designed quite a few of them. They're like climate stuff mostly. Some
Wait,
of
go
them
go
are.
slower because we can't. It's too hard to read if you're moving it. Please. Okay, Youth Strike, Climate Fridays for Future, United We Stand, Divided We Fall, No Right, no gray areas.
When it comes to survival. Yeah, it's just a bunch of like quotes and things.
And what would those be signs that you might carry in a protest, in a strike?
They might have slogans like that. I wouldn't carry those specific like pieces of paper because they're too flimsy. But yeah, I might use quotes like that on a sign.
Okay. How did you start being aware that whoa, this is a climate crisis? It's not some future problem. It's big now.
Well, I've always been like vaguely aware of it, but I was never like that. Like, I didn't really think it applied to me. I was like, but mom, I want that bar which is in plastic. I want to be able to, not have to walk everywhere. So I've always been vaguely aware, but I think I just woke up in a really boring way. Basically, someone was like, "Oh, some people in class are going on a strike. Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Sure." That person never actually went on a strike, but yeah, and then I just started to think about it. I was like, oh dear, this is really bad. And I found out more about the science. I watched some speeches by Greta Thunberg, and I was like, okay, this is a serious issue. I need to do what I can. And then I've just been like on a sort of upward learning curve as well, learning more about it and getting more like, oh my god, this is so serious. So yeah, but I think I just basically woke up about a year ago to
Um,
the
and
reality.
what do your parents think? Are they like, oh, something could happen to her out on the street, or are they like, yay, go, this is wonderful?
They're mostly like, I mean, they're not like worried about me on the street because we live in quite a small town, and even in cities, like, yeah, they're not really concerned about that. I think, yeah, my parents are mostly for it. My mum's sometimes a bit like, do you have to do this all the time or every day or whatever? But mostly they're pretty supportive, yeah.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have two younger brothers and an older half brother who doesn't live with us. Um, yeah.
And what do your brothers think about climate activism?
Well, I think my older brother, he's 10 years older, and like I don't see him that often, but he's a bit skeptical, I think, but he's like ready to support me because it's something that I do. And the older of my two younger brothers, well, they both tend to mock me about it, to be honest. That's mainly because they wanted to get at me. So I think they they kind of agree, but they're not really involved or awake. But actually, my littlest brother recently came on his first strike and he started getting more interested. He's 9, so that's good. So hopefully he's gonna, wake up a bit more, I think.
So, what organizations do you work with in particular? Because there's always more power in a group than an individual. So, who do you work with?
Well, I do like strikes with Fridays for Future, so then I'm involved with various groups under that, like Bristol Strike Group, the Bath Strike Group, the UK-wide strike group. I'm also involved with a global coalition called Polluters Out, which was founded basically to try and get the polluters out of the spheres of influence and so on.
Then excuse me, the Polluters Out is new, right? And it started in the UK.
Yeah, it's pretty new. I think it. There were a few people in the US and in South America, but I can't remember exactly where they were from, all the co-founders. But they're not from here, but there's quite a lot of people part of it here.
And were they young people who founded it, Polluters Out?
It's a youth-led movement, and they were all young women.
And you were going to go into another group before I interrupted you. So it's...
so I'm also part of not exactly a group, but we kind of are. We have group chats and we talk about stuff with the campaign to save Congo rainforest. So it's not like an official group, but we kind of network about that, and we have a Twitter account now. So yeah, I'm part of that as well. There's also a group called SOS Saturdays, which is basically against plastic pollution, and that's just in the UK. And I'm also part of Extinction Rebellion and Extinction Rebellion Youth. So I'm part of a lot of groups, really.
Does most of that organizing occur online, or do you also do face-to-face?
Quite a lot of it does occur online, especially for me because I live outside of the bigger cities around me. Like some people meet face-to-face, but I have to call in online. But when there's an action or a strike or whatever going on, I do that obviously in real life. So I do quite a lot of action in real life, although quite a bit of it is by myself. But a lot of the organising and networking occurs online.
So roughly, how much time do you spend a day online? Excuse me, organizing.
Honestly, it really depends. Today, I've just had 2 back-to-back calls, one for almost an hour, and then I've got this call with you, and I've had various conversations. So it was probably a bit longer today, but some days I hardly even check anything. So it honestly is really varied. But yeah, I couldn't really.
And roughly, what's an average homework night? I'm just thinking about how much time this all takes, doing homework.
So I've recently left school again to be homeschooled, so I don't have specific school work. So I tend to spend my time doing a lot of activism stuff because that's most of what I work at, and then sometimes I do various I don't know, bits of chores for my mum or whatever, but it's more flexible because I don't go to school. When I was at school, I wasn't as involved, but also I went to a kind of semi-alternative school, so there wasn't as much homework as there is. But yeah, I'm still probably going to take a couple of exams. We're going to get maybe tutors or something, because we've got a friend who's willing to help with that. And so I guess then that will get harder. But at the moment, I'm pretty.
What kind of exams? I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What kind of exams will you take?
Well, I'll probably get GCSEs, I guess. But yeah, I haven't thought about that too much, but I think I'll probably get a couple. So yeah, coming up to that in the next couple of years.
And why did you decide that you didn't want to be in a school, a brick and mortar school?
Well, basically, I mean, we've always been a bit more alternative, I guess. I started off in a Steiner school, and then my parents just didn't want me to go to school when I was younger because they didn't really like the system, and they didn't, want to just dump us in there at a young age. So I was home educated till I was almost 10. Then I went to mainstream for 2 years. I didn't really enjoy that very much. Then I went to a sort of semi-Steiner school, but like state funded for another 2 years. And again, I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't really have enough time to do my own thing. And also, then the school basically went bust. Like they got a bad report and they had to change loads of things and hand over management. And it was all just getting a bit difficult and confusing, and yeah, we weren't really enjoying it. Also, my dad recently moved to France, so we wanted to be able to see him more often, so that was partly why as well.
Um, so you mentioned that most of the founders of some of the groups are women, or young women. Why do you think that is? And in your interactions, I know this is hard, but roughly what percent of the people that you communicate with are young women?
The immediate figure that came to mind was something like 70%, but I think it depends because, like, in the Save Congo rainforest movement, for example, there are quite a lot of boys as well, and then there are some older men and older women who support. But I think it's partly because we, I don't know, but I think there is maybe some connection between people who identify as like female and the whole thing of Mother Earth and nature potentially. Also, there's the typical thing of women being maybe more emotional or more connected to their emotions. That's not always true, but maybe in cases where that is true, that means that you would be more likely to feel scared or sad about this, perhaps. Um, Also, obviously, Greta, who kick-started this bit of the movement, was a young woman, so perhaps that empowered young women a bit more to do this. And also, I guess there is something in it of it being the patriarchy having been a lot of a root of this crisis, which means that perhaps um, a certain type of male wouldn't want to be so involved because they might not want that abolished. Obviously, there are so many who would, but there might be a certain type of man who wouldn't, so that could be part of it as well. But yeah, I'm always careful when I talk about like how there seems to be a lot of young women in the movement, not to discredit all the young male activists who are doing cool stuff as well. So,
Right.
but those are some of the reasons why.
Do you think of yourself as a feminist?
Yeah, I do. I in the real sense of the word, not in the sense that some people twist it to being basically someone who thinks all men should be in, yeah, whatever. Yeah, but I definitely I do, and I believe in equality between like all genders, and so there are obviously gender issues which aren't linked to just the binary male and female. But yes, I do consider myself a feminist.
Mm-hmm. And what about people who are non-binary or who don't want a male or female identity? What what have you heard from them in terms of their goals? And speaking in intersectional terms, in terms of the movement and other intersectional issues.
I think, I mean, I haven't specifically discussed this like issue with them as related to perhaps being outside the gender standard, but I think there are quite a few people perhaps who aren't as, maybe going along with the binary or with the standard in a lot of ways, and I think this movement tends to attract maybe people who are a bit more might be seen to be on the outside, or obviously if you're already having issues with just even your own right to be who you are or something like that, then that might mean that you have a strong sense of like justice and fighting for causes. And I think it's really important that this movement is intersectional in all sorts of ways. And so with race, with gender, with everything basically. But yeah, I do think certain parts of the movement have tended to attract people who might be a little less, not normal because I don't like that word, but maybe outside what we see as standard when we're thinking in a very, binary terms.
On your Skype page, you mentioned LGBTQI issues. How does that fit in?
I think that probably fits in because everybody who's like maybe on a more outside or persecuted group. So, you know, people who are LGBTQIA plus, all the letters, people who are maybe black or people of color, indigenous communities, women, all sorts. It will get worse if we start, you know, going down a spiral basically of societal collapse. The first people who are going to suffer from that are going to be people who are already persecuted groups. So, you know, if you think about everyone's fighting for food, for resources, and so on, I think, you know, obviously the first people who are going to be kicked out of that or persecuted are people that, are typically discriminated against or persecuted. So I think all social justice or human rights issues do tie into the climate crisis, including that.
Thinking about tactics, school strike demonstrations that are great photo ops are a widely used one. Extinction Rebellion does more with civil disobedience and kind of almost, I would say, artistic kind of acting out of issues. Could you compare what the different emphasis are in use of tactics and what works and what doesn't work in the different groups that you work with?
Okay, yeah. So I think there is room for all kinds of things. For instance, sometimes it takes arrest or um, more like civil disobedient actions, but obviously that can be less intersectional, again, less inclusive. For instance, in the UK, like black people are 3 times as likely as white people to be arrested, so you might be less likely to want to join a sort of action like that. So it can be important because it creates a big impact. It means that you might get a chance to speak to like audiences that are caught, and then all kinds of things can come from that and a lot of publicity. And I think it is important that we have that, but it's also really important that we have things that don't have a focus on arrest, because for young people, people of color, all kinds of communities, it's a lot harder to be in a situation of arrest or potential arrest. And I think the school strikes are really important because it's a lot of very young people and it's showing their power, and it's a really good way of demonstrating, but it's a lot safer for younger kids to get involved, for all kinds of people to get involved. So I think they both work within reason. Obviously, when it gets to certain things, like there were a couple of actions in Extinction Rebellion London in October, which I didn't agree with because they hurt certain communities. For instance, there was an action at tube stations in certain communities, which were very like low-income communities, struggling communities, and I don't think they were deliberately targeted, but obviously that had an impact on people who were already suffering, and that was not a sensible thing to do. So there are a few things which I haven't agreed with, but on the whole, I think there's room for both tactics.
Extinction Rebellion has a youth wing. How does that work? Are you involved in it?
I am involved in it. There's less like XR youth in my specific town. There are basically a whole group. They're really nice, but they're all older people. But I'm involved with it a bit, and it functions basically like we go by XR's principles and so on. But we do like maybe things a bit more centered around youth. For instance, in October, I marched on the Department of Education because we were talking about specifically teaching young people the truth. So they might be more targeted actions. Other than that, it's basically just to make sure that it's, I mean, there are loads of XR groups. There are XR like Muslims, XR Christians, XR LGBTQ plus, XR, like there are loads and loads of different XR groups, I think, to make sure that everyone feels included in a community which like has people like them. So obviously for young people, it's nice to be able to work with other young people. But yeah, it's very similar to XR. It's just youth, and sometimes has more of a focus. Like back in October, the youth were at the Global Justice site, so talking about like social justice as linked to the climate crisis. It sometimes maybe has more of a link to that. But other than that, it's basically just so that youth can work with other youth within the movement.
And how is it organized? Is it mostly people talk on chat groups or Instagram or Twitter, or and is there's kind of a suspicion of leadership and hierarchy. So how, taking Extinction Rebellion Youth Wing, how is it organized in a way that gets things done that still feel democratic?
I think so. Yeah, there are a lot of chats and stuff. I haven't been so involved with that so youth recently, to be honest. And I'm not massively involved with like organizing. I just go along to like actions. But I think on the whole, all these groups are pretty non-hierarchical. Like, for instance, XR has a strategy of people's assemblies to decide things. So where everyone can like sit down, discuss things, and then a representative goes up and says what the people around them like thought, and then they make a decision based on that. So it is quite democratic on the whole. I think I wouldn't see anyone as a leader of XR Youth or Fridays for the Future or any of these groups really. There are like founders, co-founders, coordinators, but they're not like leaders and certainly nothing like dictators. It's a pretty democratic process on the whole. Obviously, it might sometimes stray outside of that, but that would be an individual error rather than the actual like principles.
Then who decides, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to march on the Ministry of Education? How is that decided? We're going to do it at this time. We're going to do this kind of outreach. We're going to ask for these kind of changes. How is that decided?
Well, I mean, it's decided mostly through like online coordination, and I think people discuss it as specific strands of the campaign. Like one of the demands is tell the truth, and obviously teach the truth, like comes under that. So I don't know who exactly first thought of that, but once someone did think of that, like they coordinated with anyone who wanted to be involved and talked about like what would be best, when would be best, who was teachers, stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of discussion is key. You know, if you want to maintain like openness and yeah, democratic system.
This was a big issue in the second wave of the women's movement. And Jo Freeman is a woman who wrote Tyranny of Structurelessness, where she says the pretense of no strong leaders just obfuscates the fact that there are people who have talents or abilities or strengths or power or whatever. And if you pretend that there aren't hierarchies, they exist anyway, but you're not discussing them. So she advocates acknowledging that there are these kind of, I don't know, informal hierarchies and they should be discussed.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. And I think where there are hierarchies, it should be kind of out in the open. I think it is possible to have something which doesn't technically really count as a hierarchy. Like there may be some people who happen to be involved, but anyone can get involved with the discussion of that. Anyone can get involved with the organization if they want to. And so whilst there might be some people who technically count as organizers who are making the decisions, if anyone can get involved with that, it's not really a hierarchy because there's not some people who are set at the top and some people are just set at a lower level. So I guess if it was a hierarchy at all, it's a fluid hierarchy. That's at its best and at its ideal. I have experienced certain, like in certain climate groups where there does seem to be a hierarchy, but at its ideal and at its principle, it would be not really a hierarchy and yeah, perhaps a fluid hierarchy at worst.
Right, like so someone says, I'll be responsible for this task of publicity for this event, and then they're not responsible for the next thing. So there's responsibilities, but they change depending on the need.
Yeah, probably. And I think also like not necessarily upstaging, it could be more than one person. Like if someone says, oh, do you want me to like publicize this? I can do some of this, and then someone else could also join them. Obviously there's things about capacity, like you can't have everyone doing one thing, but I
Right.
think there is a place for everyone if they want it. Again, at its best and at its ideal, you know, that might not always happen.
Right. Um, when you do you meet face to face with one of those groups locally?
I it depends. Like sometimes I go to meetings or actions with. I also sometimes go to meetings with Extinction Rebellion Broom, but that's mostly like older people. And we don't really do that much individual action because we're quite a small place. So, but I do sometimes go to those meetings. However, it's not like a regular thing. I don't go every week to a specific meeting
And
with.
right. So do they exchange who's facilitating? Is there one person who usually facilitates? Who sets up the agenda? How are those kind of organizing decisions made for a face-to-face meeting?
I think people like volunteer to facilitate, or like, what they think. Like if someone says, oh, I can facilitate, then they have like a rota or schedule, and whoever can facilitate like puts their name down for a certain week, a certain time, or just, who wants to facilitate, or I can. And agenda, we have agenda points. So someone will put like AP, discuss, I don't know, discuss outreach for this event, and then we'll just try and discuss all that in the agenda. Which, I mean, that's what happens with some youth groups. With like XR Froome, it's more specifically like to talk about a certain thing. Like sometimes they just have like discussions, but often you get into like your working groups, like people you're working with, or your affinity groups, which are like the people you're going to be with when you go up to an action. And so that's a bit different. But with the youth groups, even though I don't really very often participate in the meetings, I know that that's how it's sorted out.
Mm-hmm. So there would be different people facilitating, taking notes, setting the agenda. It could be totally different week to week or month to month. It would be very fluid.
Yeah, on the whole, again, at its ideal, there may be some people who are a bit more pushy or whatever, but on the whole, yeah, it's whoever can do it, whoever can facilitate, and agenda is, anyone who has an agenda point can put it forward and they'll try and discuss it. Obviously, if everyone did, then they wouldn't be able to discuss it all in one meeting, but
right.
You can carry it over to the next one.
And what do you do with the issue that some people talk a lot and it's like, oh, come on, this is just talking rather than really figuring something out? Some groups set up like time limits. We'll spend 10 minutes on this issue and then 5 minutes on this, or is it not a problem? Talkers.
I think, again, I don't have a massive amount of experience because I don't live in a place where there are regular group meetings like that. But I think, on the whole, I mean, there's a policy of openness for it to start with. So I think people might be able to say, like, okay, like, can we hear from someone else now, like whoever was facilitating. Also, if you do online meetings, there's a, hands up. So once that person seems to have got to a break in what they're saying, you go on to the next person, or you might say, okay, well, some other people had their hand up, so we'll move on to them now. And I think matters on the agenda, it's like however long it takes to discuss properly, like, if you're discussing, say, demands for a specific campaign, once they're decided, if someone just goes on chatting, you might say, we'll get on to the next thing now. So, yeah, I think in a diplomatic way, it's perfectly possible to, get people to stop going on and on and on.
Mm. Another issue is burnout. How do you deal with that personally, and what do you see in terms of other people? Because it's easy to burn out.
Yeah, I think I would like take a bit of a break. I try and I don't stress out too much if I don't have stuff to do. I mean, my mum forces me to leave my phone downstairs every night, so I'm not like staying up coordinating stuff all night. And I usually lie in for a while in the morning, so I don't specifically, So sometimes if I'm feeling quite depressed, it does help to be able to talk to people and vent, but I wouldn't go on a call, go and discuss and coordinate a load of things. For a while, I just left off one app entirely, which I regretted when I came back to all my notifications. But yeah, and I try to think about. I try to console myself mentally by thinking about this is making a difference. You are doing something. Another thing is digital striking. So, I mean, I've done this sometimes. Recently, I have a friend who does the campaign for the Congo rainforest, which for many of us, we do it every day. We strike every day. And she said, I'm really not in a great place with my mental health right now. So I'm going to do a digital strike every day instead. And that means you take a photo, you use the hashtags, you tag people, you talk about the issue online, but you don't go out on the street with a sign. So it can be a lot easier to just spread the message online rather than in real life, where someone, if someone's abusive, you're actually having to deal with it right then rather than just blocking them. Yeah, so that can be a good solution if you're feeling really tired or depressed. I try to sometimes like motivate myself, and also I think talking about it is really important. Like I don't like burn out because I'm so stressed. It's often because I'm like really depressed about something. So I would often talk about it because my Twitter account, like I have some really amazing people who are always like there for me on there. So I would talk about it on there, or I might talk to my family depending on where our relationship is right then. If I've had an argument, I'm not going to talk to them, but. Yeah, so I think there are a variety of things you can do, and then sometimes it's just really hard. Like sometimes I just lie awake for hours remembering everything I haven't done. I'm feeling depressed and sort of crowded, and like there's a big weight on me, and sometimes you just can't do anything about it. But I find writing helps because I'm like quite a writer. I'm feeling like so I just write a poem or I just write down what I'm feeling. And sometimes music as well. The other day I was feeling really depressed, so I just stuck my headphones in because then I wouldn't have to be with my own thoughts. I could be with the music. So it depends, but yeah, there's a lot of things you can do.
Do you do a regular exercise or fun, go out with your friends kind of things that are just fun?
I don't specifically like regularly do that. I'm not like, I don't know. I don't have a massive amount of friends like who I can just like go out with. I mean, I don't have a massive amount of friends, full stop, except in the climate movement. But for fun, I often do like reading or writing for leisure, and I might hang out with my family, or like I don't know, watch a movie or something. So yeah, I definitely do things for fun, and often I just like try to not stress out and just like have a lie in and do some reading or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have like specific activities that I do for fun, except I go to a like aerial circus, so like hoop trapeze type thing. I do go to a class once a week, and I sometimes go to like a roller disco, so like roller skates with music and lights and stuff. But
That's
it
therapeutic.
depends. Yeah, those are like my leisure things on the whole.
I interviewed a woman in Turkey who is an aerial performer, and she uses it as part of demonstrations. She'll hang from a tree
Yeah,
with
cool.
some kind of sign. Yeah, she's on YouTube. In the States, and I think in UK too, there's an emerging, growing issue of depression and anxiety, especially among young women, teens. Not as much from young men. And I wondered if you see that with your peers, and any explanation why young women would be increasingly anxious and depressed.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I see the specific issue of climate anxiety with my peers in the climate movement, and that's pretty much a global issue. But obviously, some of us here we have the privilege to be able to mull over our anxiety rather than, escape from the flood or the fire right now. In which case, you don't have time to go over and over in your mind what's going to happen. You've just got to get away or, try and survive. But I think again, if it's specifically among young women with the climate anxiety, that might be just because there are more young women in the climate movement, which there do seem to be, or it could be to do with the supposedly more in contact with emotions thing. I don't know. I'm quite a mental person. I'm not like a massively physical person, so I spend a lot of time up in my head, so can get to be a stressful place. But
Mm.
I don't really know what an explanation for a wider depression anxiety is. I guess it's just a lot of things are going wrong, I think, in both our countries specifically, but also so worldwide, like most places. They've got some politicians who aren't exactly great, or some disasters which are going on. So I think maybe it's just a worldwide sense of like something's got to change, or it's going to be bad.
It seems to me another explanation could be that the women's movement said you can do everything and you should do everything and you should get really good grades and get into a good college and have a good career and look great and make baby food and blah 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 blah. And see if you agree that in a way there's more pressure on young women now to be everything, to achieve in all kinds of arenas in a way there's not for young men.
Yeah, I think, well, there's always been in certain ways, like, yeah, I think there's just a natural thing that, like, it not in all cases, but in some cases, perhaps that a young man is just is gonna be all right anyway, whereas you specifically pressure your daughters to, like, if you don't get good grades, then you won't get to be that or do that. And then obviously the more typically like sexist view of like you've got to look good, otherwise you won't get to get a good man, if that's the way you're inclined or whatever, and so I think there is a lot of pressure on young women on the whole, just worldwide and in a lot of ways, because even if we say like, oh, it's fine, we're going to accept everyone, there is still like there's a lot more pressure to look good, and like you've got to make sure that you don't go out looking like completely a mess, or which there is less pressure on young men. So in a lot of ways, I think there is a lot more pressure on young women to make up for the fact that they're women in a way, and that there's still almost that attitude like you're not going to be good just as you are. You've got to make yourself better. So I think that's a definite issue, which is just crap, because people are who they are, and that's like you're good enough as you, I think, but no one really. Yeah, I think even I was talking about this the other day. I was on a panel about climate anxiety, and I was talking about how, whilst logically you might feel like, I know that I'm okay, I'm adequate, there's still an emotional and subconscious thing of inadequacy, which is in a lot of people, and maybe specifically in women and girls. And it's really hard to know what to do, because you can be logical, but it still can be there.
A lot of people connect it with social media. Somebody has, oh, I see they went to a party on Instagram and I wasn't invited, or oh, they photoshopped their photo and they look fabulous and I don't, or they have this many likes and I don't. Do you think that's like too simplistic, or do you think that really is a part of it, the social media?
I think it is a part of it in like normal social media. So like, oh, everyone posts selfies and oh, they look great, and I look stupid. But obviously the only way I use social media is in the climate movement, and I find that on Twitter to be a very, very nice sphere of social media to move in, because there's all this like support and acceptance there on the whole. It's like, you're doing great, you're doing this for this movement, and that's amazing. And I think there's a lot of positivity among the climate movement on Twitter. I think I think on the whole, there's less stuff about selfies and looking good perhaps on Twitter anyway, but definitely in the climate movement, it's a nicer sphere to move in. However, yeah, the not getting so many likes thing can be a bit of a, I don't massively get a complex about that, but obviously if you see like they're always getting attention, they've got way more like followers, and that means they're getting way more attention, that can, if you're already feeling down, feel a bit like, I wish I did. But on the whole, I think it actually helps me rather than hurts me more. But that's because of the spheres I move in. I think if people who are just on there for general stuff, and they like going on about selfies and who looks good and who doesn't, it can be potentially a very harmful thing. And obviously trolls and hate doesn't help at all. So there are definitely negative sides, and I think it is a contributor. But for me personally, it hasn't been that much of an issue.
How many followers do you have on Twitter?
5,800 and something.
Oh my, that must take a lot of time.
Yeah, I had, actually, for the first like 2 months that I had Twitter, I had 19 followers. I got stuck at 19. Then someone posted his speech, which Greta retweeted, and my followers went, whoa. And yeah, back in November, I had about 400, and then Greta retweeted me, and it went way up. And since then, it's been going up in leaps and bounds, like a lot more. So now I'm like, yeah, steadily rising in followers. But it does take a lot of time, and it's funny how it works. Like 2 months at 19, and then suddenly you get 500 in one day. It can be a bit strange like that.
I
But
can see how it would be kind of addictive. It's kind of like slot machines that you put in
yeah,
your little bit of money and you get feedback, and you put in more and you get more coins come tossing out. It's kind of like an
yeah,
addictive process.
yeah, it can be. Definitely, I think. And then yeah, I'm not too like desperate for that anymore. I post quite a lot like of stuff that's going on because I like to talk, and sometimes I don't always have that in real life. Also, I have so many tweets on my page because I retweet people all the time because I'm really focused on like uplifting other people's voices. I think it's one of the most important things I can do, and one of the only ways I can justify that the attention that I do get is by making sure that other people get that too. So yeah, but it can be addictive, definitely.
Hmm. With like the Congo rainforest, do you strike every day by going on the street with signs, or how do you strike?
Usually, yeah, I go on the street with a sign, basically, or yeah, sometimes I do a digital strike, so I just post a photo on social media and like spread the word there. I usually do a little broadcast as well, like talking about what I'm doing that day, like what's going on with my campaign. Yeah, I'm on a call. Okay, I'm coming in a minute, or like sometime. Sorry, my brother. Yeah. So, I think yeah, I mostly strike on the street, but sometimes I do like a silent strike. Like when I was ill for a while last year, I did a silent strike, so I just didn't talk for like half an hour. Um, and sometimes I do a digital strike, but on the whole, yeah, out on the street with a sign, basically. What
And
it says on the,
are you usually by yourself, or do you have people who join you on the street?
I'm always by myself. Sometimes someone comes and talks to me and joins me for a little bit. My little brother's joined me once or twice recently, and then each month there's a big demonstration which I'll join. But on the whole, yeah, I'm by myself. Although when I do weekly, like Fridays for Future demonstrations, so what Greta started, I do that campaign as well. If I go into Bath, there's usually one or two like adults who do it there, but mostly, yeah, I'm by myself.
And
Well, yeah, solo but not alone, as we say. I've set up this group which is aiming to empower solo strikers. Like you might be by yourself there, but you're not actually alone worldwide. But
hmm,
yeah, in person alone.
hmm. And what kind of reaction do you get from people passing by? I mean, is it like, "Wah, nah, 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 you're crazy," or is it like, "Go, go, go, go," or what, or both?
Um, a mixture, yeah. I think on the whole, um, most people are indifferent to be honest, but then you get like a thumbs up, and I think more supportive people than negative people that might just be where I am. And some people just sort of look at you and you can see they don't approve, but they don't really talk to you. Like not that many people I've encountered seem willing to like actually go and really argue with me. I've had a very sour old man come and talk to me a few times who obviously is disapproving, and that's a bit difficult, but he hasn't come by for a long time, so and I find that certain, specifically boys, like slightly younger boys, will go like, "Yeah, save the rainforest," and they're obviously being like sarcastic, and laughing at me. And sometimes like slightly older, like teenage to preteen boys who are of a certain type tend to like laugh at me. But on the whole, it's fairly positive to indifferent rather than negative.
Well, how do you handle the ones who are making fun of you or something? Just ignore them, or smile and hi, or
Usually I basically ignore it. Sometimes I make like a sarcastic remark, or I'm like, stick my fingers up at them, but that's usually when they're like out of the way, mostly because I don't want to get into confrontation. And when someone like comes and tries to discuss it rationally but obviously disapproves, I discuss it rationally,
yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, this is more important than like what else I could be doing, or yeah, I don't actually go to school, so I'm not skipping class, things like that, just logical explanations, and try to stay calm because I don't want to get into a shouting match.
No. It seems like the main thrust of this youth climate activism is listen to science. It's about the
Yeah,
science. Don't listen. It's not what I say. It's what the scientists say. Let's look at
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it is because obviously, if you could listen to me, but like you need to basically listen to the experts because I mean, in any case, you don't go and talk to someone on the street about what they think about, what they think about measles. You go and talk to the doctor about what they think about it, and it's the same thing. So we are just drawing attention to this issue because the scientists have been ignored, but yeah, people need to really talk and listen to the scientists, especially politicians and corporation leaders need to be focusing on the science. And if they don't know the science, they need to be educating themselves. If they do know the science, they need to be listening rather than just hearing. Um, so yeah, I think that is basically the whole message because it's no good listening to some kids on the street if you're not going to listen to the science that they're trying to draw your attention to.
Is Boris Johnson still a climate denier? What,
So I don't think he would openly admit to being one the same way that some people we could mention do, but he's definitely not a great leader in that regard or in any regard, in fact. But um, he basically recently came out after he sacked the minister for COP26 or something that he had said he doesn't really get the climate issue.
what?
Um,
What
he
does
yeah
that
like he
mean?
doesn't really get it, he doesn't really understand it, so I don't know why that is.
That's so
But
strange because it's very simple. First graders
yeah,
get it.
exactly.
First graders
Yeah,
get it.
it's very simple, so I think that's basically code for he doesn't understand why it's a problem. Basically he wants to keep with business as usual. And his targets for net zero, the targets at the moment from the Conservative Party and yeah, so therefore the country's targets, because they're in charge, are 2050, which is basically 20 years too late at least. So he's not exactly a climate denier. He wouldn't label himself as one, I don't think, the way like Donald Trump basically does, but he is basically one indeed, I would say, rather than if not name. Yeah.
And how does one go about influencing him and his government? I mean, does like Extinction Rebellion and school strike try to influence members of parliament, or is that like it's too hopeless?
I think there are like a few strands to that. So one is that we basically agree we need a total system change. But whilst we have this system, we've got to try and work within it. So sometimes people seek audiences with like members of parliament. The recent Teach the Future campaign with UK Student Climate Network, which is about education, like educating in schools about the climate crisis, went to parliament and like to talk about that. And so there are like there are there's some discussion with MPs and everyone, like loads of people use petitions to the politicians rather, and letters and so on. And yeah, so there is some level of like trying to talk to them, and when there's an election we usually do some like campaigning around that state, not saying who you should vote for, but please vote for people who have an adequate climate plan. Um, and yeah, but I think it is a lot about we know we need to change the system, and that the current systems of like oppression, discrimination, and capitalism don't work. So there's sort of an in between point there because we know we need system change, but whilst we have this system, we try and influence or talk to and work with people. Obviously, all the protests are basically targeted at like world leaders and then like corporation leaders and so on.
In terms of models of socialist democratic nations, I always look to Scandinavia. Where do you look for models of countries that have changed system ahead of everyone else, at least?
I think it depends. I mean, when we talk about system change, we don't just mean like changing this specific system we have now. We know that all political movements have currently failed. Give me a second. Yeah, it's just my mum saying she doesn't want me to be too much longer because my dinner is going cold,
Oh,
basically.
sorry.
But I will finish. I will finish with this question. That's
Okay.
fine. No, it's me as well. But yeah, I think that there are some places which are doing better. But yes, talking about Scandinavian countries, I think some of them may be doing better. But like as Greta often says, Sweden is seen as a climate leader, but it doesn't really mean a lot. And their carbon footprint is actually among the 10 worst in the world. So I think they are, again, it's something that's seen as something that maybe they're not. And I think that, like I mean, to quote Greta again, basically she said recently that all political movements in all political systems, their current form, have done so. The right, the left, as well as the centre, they've all failed in their current form. So it's not just about changing from capitalist systems to maybe more socialist systems, even though I tend to lean towards that side. It's a total systemic reform, and it needs to be led by the people a lot more, and yeah, in general.
I know you have to go. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? What will you be doing?
I honestly don't know. I just hope I won't have to be an activist anymore. That's basically all. But I mean, I guess that I'll be writing stuff because that's all I really like doing. Yeah,
Do you want to go
but
to uni?
I don't think so. Not really. I don't really see any point, to be honest. For me, I don't think there's a specific career path I want to follow which requires a degree. So yeah, but I just hope I won't have to be an activist, basically.
Oh my! I hope that works out. I would love to talk